Everybody, welcome back to the Insiders Lounge. Today we have another special episode. This week we're joined by Bingy. Bingy, thank you for joining us, and feel free to give yourself a quick introduction.
Hi, I'm Bingy Lara. I'm the head of recruitment for the Seattle Sounders Academy. There you go.
If you can see there on the side.
I try to find the next young pro player pathway kids for our academy, and hopefully they can home someday play in Lumen Field.
I love it. I always want to get things started off with your first soccer memory. So if we can dive into that to start the episode off today.
Well, I wasn't playing. I had 3 older brothers and a family that played. So my first soccer memory was just like rolling around next to a field that other big kids were playing on. And that's like one of my earliest, forget soccer memories, that's one of my earliest actual memories, is being able to, like, I can smell the grass. I can kind of put myself back there in that moment. But yeah, I was watching my big brothers play.
I was similar. I'm the younger brother of 2, and I always watched him play. He wasn't really the athlete in the family, but he's kind of just thrown into soccer naturally. Yeah. So I would always watch him, and I think from that I almost got this, like, it's almost when you watch your idols play on TV, watching your older brothers, it's almost like, okay, I want to be them. When I'm older, I want to be like them. Right?
For sure that. And then there was all these other brothers too, like all these other teammates of theirs that they were just, like, to me, like you said, idols. All these just older guys, and they were just local guys. They're playing the game, Some made it really, really far, but the idea is it had nothing to do with that. It was just, how much passion they were maybe playing with, or how much intensity I saw as a really, really young kid.
It's like that sense of community that you build, the sort of footballing culture that everyone speaks on. Alongside that, I want to get into sort of your childhood and your family background. You mentioned obviously your older brothers. So let's get into, what was it like growing up as Bingy from a young age, getting into football? I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, the game kind of raised me. There was, my family systems and the home is part of what raises you. But to be honest, man, I mean, I was on the field so much. I was getting raised by other people's moms and other people's dads and other people's older brothers and big sisters. So, like, I'd say raising Striker Football Club out of Las Cruces, New Mexico raised me, I would say, is the biggest, probably most strong influence, because it was multiple parents. It was a family, a tribe of people that actually raised me.
So you mentioned New Mexico. Give someone, if someone's listening in from the UK or from Germany or somewhere around the world, give someone a little bit more insight into New Mexico. What's the culture like? What's it like growing up there?
You got to come for the food. It's the best food in the world. There's no question about it, especially Southern New Mexico. Sorry to you, Albuquerque and Santa Fe folks. Southern New Mexico cuisine is there's certain restaurants. And if you want to get my details after this podcast, we can actually connect with different restaurants. It's one of my favorite things to do. But yeah, I think this is food. It's the people. It's a very old, where I'm from, actually the town of Mesilla next to Las Cruces and across to Verino, New Mexico, where my family, a lot of my family originated. That area is very, very old. Like, some of the cities are so old that, that they precede a lot of the states in the Union. So there's just history, rich history, Spanish history, native history, everything you can actually come out. And then the views, probably the skylines and the ability to look across and see all the different colors. Artists moved to New Mexico for the colors. But that's it. Yeah.
And then on the soccer development side, like, just from my personal opinion, I don't hear too many players coming out of there or big talents. Yeah. I'm curious, sort of the system there. What are the bigger teams or the bigger clubs that are producing players, and what's maybe the natural pathway of a player coming from New Mexico?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things about MLS is I've identified New Mexico as a place, where Portland can go down and Colorado can go down and see these players and, we could, for lack of a better word, extract these players into their environment. But the biggest pathway right now that I'm really recognizing is New Mexico United. Their academy is doing really well. They've done the scouting is bringing in a diverse group of players that actually goes on to Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, these areas of football there. Now they can further their career and develop. I think that's the number one thing, is New Mexico United's ability to scout the whole state and bring in the top players outside of, outside of Albuquerque to bring them in. Traditionally, I mean, it's funny because you talk about pipelines, and it's not really a traditional place where you would get players. But every year or so, there's always a player that comes out and hits. I mean, the biggest to my mind is Edgar Castillo. He's played for both senior national teams, Liga MX, MLS. Decorated player, played in Libertadores. He's definitely gone the farthest and the biggest, and something that now kids in Las Cruces can aspire to. But I mean, thinking like most recently, what Aaron Herrera done, Christian Herrera have done. These players have come. Christian at Switchbacks in Colorado Springs, and then Aaron, MLS All-Star, plays for Guatemala. I mean, that thing is, those guys came out of the same dirt I did, and every once in a while it'll hit. And here at Sounders, in the first team staff, Freddie Wattis has gone the farthest as coaches. So it's interesting. Is like we can do all that thing, but you may not. They're one of the best scouts to ever come out of North America. Aron Lujan. Have you heard of this name?
No, not off the bat.
He's the original Las Cruces. So I tell people a lot, like the people that have made it out, although it's not by volume, made it out to big levels in football. If we did not look at Aron Lujan as the guy that actually went out and did the thing, he's a legend. He's worked for U.S. Soccer. Works now for Manchester United, and that's like whoa. And he's in the same place.
Can't get much bigger than that, right?
Yeah, it blows me away. But then he's the most humble guy, and I tell him every time I see him, like, thank you so much for what you did. Because if I didn't see someone make it, to your point, maybe I would have not thought to try to make something out of my life in football.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have that idol. We were speaking of the older brothers and looking up to them, but I think from a player development pathway, having players to look up to, having coaches to look up to, there's all these different aspects of the footballing industry. And I think as a Canadian, we sort of have a different pathway as well compared to the US system or compared to Europe. And it's the same thing. Having someone from my area, which I didn't have, go on to become a professional, or even at the minimum a professional or a high college level player, like that is what drives the inspiration to want to go and do more than that person, right? Almost beat them out and become the idol for your area.
Or someone with a podcast, Chad. That's what I mean.
That's it.
Someone with a podcast. Because now people are like, well, I could maybe try that too. And that's something, that's not nothing. That's
I appreciate that.
Thing.
Yeah, of course. So let's get into, you hinted a little bit at your career there. So I'd love to hear more on your youth career going into the college level, and then also your transition into scouting, into coaching. You kind of had an interesting adaptation, and I love to hear how athletes are able to kind of transition all of that time and effort you spend on working to become maybe it's your goal as a professional athlete and you want to focus a lot on that, and your whole day almost surrounds that. And then all of a sudden you transition into something new. So I'd love to hear how you did that as well.
Yeah, well, it's as I tell young players and they're developing, it's a rough road. Development is non-linear. It's the number one thing I tell every player. And sometimes they think it's just rhetoric. I'm like, no, it's development. You're going here, there, and everywhere. And if you can ride the course, stay the course, and be true to yourself, then I think you go there. But yeah, I guess starting out in New Mexico, in order to get the best competition series, we'd have to go out of state. We have to go compete, and we'd go to these tournaments in California. And I think the biggest probably event that I went to as a youth was Dallas Cup. And at the Dallas Cup, I got recruited. And Disney Showcase. Disney Showcase used to be like a top division. It was just like one division, and all the top players went. All the top teams went. And our team from New Mexico, Striker FC, we were a smaller club, but we did well. We had some players that kind of put it together, and a great coaching work ethic that kind of instilled in us that we can go out and do this thing. And a few of us got lucky enough to get recruited and get moved on. And with none of that happens without your teammates, right? I know that in scouting and recruiting now. Like if you're not in a team that's doing the business, then it's very hard to get scouted. And I look back at all those times with all those guys, and they're all professionals in every other field that you could think of, but they were there doing the push, right? And then guys like myself, Edgar went to Mexico to play down there. Noel Castillo, his little brother as well, went down to Mexico, and they did well. And then a couple of us played university in Division I, and that was like unheard of, really. Like a couple out of the same Southern New Mexico team would be doing that. But I went to Kentucky, and I remember my mom was like, "Where's Kentucky? Like, what do you mean? Show me on a map what we're going to do." Because when I went on my visit, I went alone. She had not been. But I just loved the visit, and I loved the school, and I loved the idea of how competitive kind of everybody was in the environment. And I was like, I'm going to try myself into this, you know, and I splashed out. One of the schools I almost went to was University of New Mexico, who did really well. I think my freshman year, they went to the national final. So my head was like, well, always should I have gone or not? But I think it was good for me to get out and kind of see myself as whatever. And the play, you know, as my career kind of tailed off, my knees were starting to deteriorate a bit, and I was trying to recognize that. And, you know, I just didn't know if I was going to carry on and play professionally. But I knew that I loved this game, but I had no direction. If I'm being totally honest, like I'm talking no direction. And through my surgeries, I had start to, and this is where I'm going to get kind of honest with you, Chad, I started to like get into pain management with these pills, right? And it was whatever I was doing. I didn't think, honestly, there was a point where I didn't think necessarily I was all the way managing that pain management, certainly. But through that, Ian Collins, Jeff Chaney, Matt Wilkerson, these guys, Jeremy Groves, they brought me in as a staff member. They called me a student assistant because I hadn't graduated yet. And I think, honestly, I look back now at kind of thing and helping people through moments. Ian Collins, I think he knew that I needed help graduating college. So I needed something to go to. I needed a class to attend. I needed to go to trainings and make sure and be accountable. And he just knew my personality type. And as you drop, and anybody that stops playing and kind of tails off of their playing career, you not just lose the game, you lose your identity. Your identity is tied into your game. Like everybody ever told me it was Bingy the player. And that's how I was. And all of a sudden you're not Bingy the player anymore. You're just another person in the planet, to be honest with you, if you haven't started another thing. And Ian Collins kind of given me the opportunity. And then my oldest brother would call me every morning and was pretty much demanded that I go apply for a graduate degree. And it was like, so you got to do that. And so you make sure you finish this. And like, and he's persistent in that way. And Ian Collins is persistent. And my mom is persistent. And through all that guidance, I haven't touched a pill since that time frame. And a decade out of that, maybe more than a decade out of that. And the reality is, it's the support and the love of now my now wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, and she kind of told me, you're a little bit different when you're on those kind of, and I don't know. The way she didn't even slander me, but she just said, I don't know. That day I stopped.
Wow. And
so
do you know what
the pathway? Yeah.
Do you know what they saw in you? I'm curious. Maybe if we speak on if we were to bring Ian in this and we were discussing it with Ian, what do you think he saw in you that made him want to jump in and give you that support, or even your brothers? Obviously, there's the brotherly love, but what do you think they saw? I think they saw something different in you to say, hey, you know what? We're going to put time towards you, the support that you need to get out of that situation.
I couldn't really comment on what they saw in me. I guess I can comment on what I would see and how I invest my time, and saying like, if there's a spark of something, if it's something maybe you see outside, external, that's kind of causing a lot of the things. It's not really internal when you work with the person and there's no, inherent problem with the dialogue, with the intentions. Then generally it's just somebody needs a little bit of a nudge. And for Ian, my path with Ian was some way, he was, known as one of the most intense college coaches to ever coach in the NCAA. And I made it through that school, and I feel very, very proud of that. But also throughout that time, I never had a hesitation that he cared about me. Since the moment he met me on my official visit, that he cared about what I was going to do. He was very hard on me. And very, very, but also as I, transitioned from the player into a coach, I think he valued my game sense. I think he valued my ability to kind of talk to players. I had played with a bunch of the guys just previously, so it was a lot, some of the incoming freshmen, those guys they don't know who I was. So they were just kind of coming in with their, chip on their shoulder, but it was a learning curve for me. But what they saw, man, Chad, sorry, I couldn't tell you what my wife saw in me. I couldn't tell you, buddy. It's more like really fortunate to have whatever they saw, I would say, is my comment.
No, that's a great point. And I think without that time, we speak on the hardships. I know you were mentioning sort of the up and down of a soccer career. Yeah. I always relate it to a roller coaster, right? You have this just roller coaster of emotions constantly. This is throughout anyone's life, but I think a soccer career especially, you'll see the ups and downs, and it's almost how can you keep that roller coaster as level as possible throughout those turbulent times. But I think, like what you just discussed there, a time like that brought you into coaching, which brought you into where you are now, right? I don't think you would have ever, you might not have ever, you might have carried on playing, and who knows what would have happened later on. But I think that's a cool way to see that even though there's down times in terms of a career or your life in general, I think there's always a brighter side just around the corner, right? And that's like sort of the link to that.
If you work. If you work for it, though, it's not just going to swing around, I don't think. And I think if I would have sat around, I don't think it would have hit. I honestly, it probably wouldn't hit. But like looking back at not this GA Cup, but the previous GA Cup, Ian Collins is now a staff member at IMG. So I'm able to, hang out with him and he go over there, for lack of a better word, and we watch games together, and I, meet him in his office, and I thank him all the time for what he did, and he doesn't let me thank him. Obviously, he's just kind of like, whatever. Like, from his perspective, it's, you did good, buddy, whatever. It's, But for me, And I remember when I went away and my mom saw how he coached, I remember she was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Well, I'm in it. And my teammates at Kentucky and telling you, the whole staff, really, really important people. Coach Cheney and Coach Wilkerson, they're still my coaches, essentially.
Right. No, that's amazing to hear. So then from that point, let's carry on in sort of your coaching career. You went on to coach there for a few years, then Real Monarchs, US Soccer, you had a few different stints. So if you can sort of touch on those and give a quick summary, maybe some of the key learnings that you gained from each experience, and then we'll move on to what you're doing today.
Yeah, buddy. I from Kentucky, it was just like a student assistant and then a volunteer assistant, and then I needed something to do, and that's where my brother really shoved towards, you need to get a graduate degree. And I had never considered myself a coach, so I kind of was just doing it. But then a former coach at Kentucky, Warren Lipka, was now at Morehead State, and he reaches out to me and says, would you like to come be a graduate assistant at this program? And that's where I went to the women's side. And if you're talking about learning experience, that's the one. Like, that's the one major place that I learned how to be a coach. I coached my first 2 years at Kentucky barking like I played. Like I coached it like I used to lead it on the field, and then after, it's not the same thing, and you kind of learn that the longer you're in coaching, and anybody coaches, you would get on there would understand that kind of sentiment. Was I shouted across the field in preseason to a fifth-year senior, something, I don't know. It wasn't negative. It was just like I shouted across the field at her, and she looked over at me. She didn't turn her whole body towards me. She just kind of glanced over at me, kind of chuckled, and didn't move. And I thought, well, how am I going to solve this problem, right? Like, what am I going to do? Shout closer to her? Or what am I going to do? I'm like, nothing. So then I just waited till the water break and chatted with her. And then I started chatting with all of them. And that was kind of how I started to coach. And then when I was at Monarchs, I may have lost a little bit of that, because I got back into we're playing for money. It's the pro game. It's different. And these others were student athletes. And it kind of, my brain rationalized that. And still, the best things I could have learned in that stint was to talk to players more. And then really the reality is maintain that trust. Like, you can gain trust, but maintenance of trust is just as hard, or maybe even more difficult. It's through all the ups and downs, and it's a lot easier when you're winning. And you lose a couple games and you lose a couple starting roles, and now that
everything goes out the window. Yeah.
So honestly, through those stints at Monarchs, and then now I went on to be a technical director at Federal Way FC, that's now been absorbed by Pac Northwest here in Washington. It was Federal Way is a place where you're working with kids and not necessarily teaching a full concept. That was one of the things I did, is I introduced some curriculum to some coaches and gave them some sessions and things like that. But then reality, a lot of the stuff I did was making sure kids were staying out of trouble and getting on boards with disciplinary committees to reduce suspensions from 10 games to 1, all those kind of things, and unreasonable match reports for youth players. So I was fighting a different kind of fight. And then just kind of Seattle United. So all these places I'm kind of learning how to do. But at that place, I didn't really get a chance to coach that much. It was more like management of teams and not, kind of delve into how I want to break down a back four, what my system is, my whole style of play, who I am. I didn't know that stuff yet still. I still was defining that. And when I was working before at Real Monarchs, it was with Freddie, and it was more like his and shared, but it wasn't my own, how I think football should be played or teams should win, right? Or not lose. And so I'm kind of developing that. But then I started to work with a couple players, some really special players, honestly, that have gone on to be different people. And some, one's here in in Sounders Academy, and he's done so well. He's Etienne Veillard. He's a Federal AFC alum. But then there's so many others, countless others that are still playing the game and doing well for themselves and carrying on, helping get to their education through the game. So that part's invaluable to me, that part of coaching at Federal Way. But then at Seattle United, there was coaching in the ECNL, which win, win, because the product is, it's a development model, but how do you get the best players to come to your place? You can't go recruit them because recruiting's improper. Like, you can't recruit kids across the areas. So how do you win? How do you get people to come to your club? You win. And your players maybe go from that club to Sounders is another way, right? People are like, oh, that club produces Sounders. There's no one place that produces Sounders, but if you think and see a pathway, maybe that's for you, right? So that kind of win mentality was really instilled in across all the ECNL Northwest and across the league. And in that winning environment, it produces top players, because maybe where they are getting less of a competition environment as MLS Next, it is competitive. ECNL is very competitive, so that they are creating this league, especially in the Northwest. The ECNL Northwest League is very, very, very strong. Top teams come out of that and go win it all. So considering that, I learned how to manage, not how to win, because I think that's winning and losing. There's such a fine line between how to win. I'm telling you, the longer I'm in it, there's no real line between winning and losing. It's more about how it is and how you develop and that kind of thing. But what I learned is, not learned, but I really had to manage a load of parents, and great parents. All love their kids. Like, there was not a parent that didn't love their kid, but expectations, and expectations of what they're getting out of a paid product and that kind of thing. So I think that's just another managing relationships and getting to know the kids and getting to know the families and getting to know, and them getting to know me. I can be eccentric as a coach and kind of say, this is what we're going to do. But then ultimately, I think that if I can continue to gain relationship understanding and continue to, then it's only really what goes back to my degree in psychology or my master's in counseling, which I thought I was going to be maybe a guidance counselor. Guess I'm a guidance counselor now. Dr. Spradlin, yeah. Dr. Spradlin, thank you at the Morehead State University for making a counselor in this environment, essentially.
There's so much to unpack there. There's so many great insights. Okay. I want to start with you mentioned the idea of barking when you're a coach. And do you think that comes down to like a personality where you really when you become your like sort of final form of coaching, I guess you could say, or where you really strive to become that peak of coaching? I think it almost becomes closer to what your personality type is.
Yeah,
where
sure.
I feel like you are very much, when just the little conversations that we've had, you're very calm, and when we have that one-on-one time, I find that's where you gain so much insight with someone, where you're almost coaching them, and it makes sense. You have a background in psychology because you really get that feeling from you. And so I wonder if maybe that's what it was, where as you grew in maturity, you almost realized, look, barking isn't my coaching type. That's not how I should be coaching. But that might be someone else's personality. Someone who's outgoing and rambunctious might be a barker, I guess you could say. Someone that's loud and sort of demanding results from a team like that.
Yeah.
But I think you're almost more of like a one-on-one style conversation rather than the barking.
Honestly, I don't know. Like, you watch UFC or MMA and you walk in like different disciplines, and some are wrestlers, some are boxers, some are different kind of, jiu-jitsu. It depends on what kind of thing they are. But if they're better, like if they can wrestle but also box, now you're in a different kind of space. And I think that's part of, how I look at bringing something to the table. So if I can have a bark, I don't have to use it all the time. Like, maybe I use it once. Mm-hmm. But it's a better use of my bark, essentially, right? Where maybe the other skill I have is more like wrestling, or I have this other thing that's more like the individual get to know the person kind of conversation and coaching, which I'm better at. So I may need the other thing.
Right.
I may need the other personality type, but like some of my heroes in coaching are Ancelotti and Conte. And Ancelotti doesn't seem to be barking that much. And Conte is a wild dog, like a dog off the leash. So like, I don't know, man. I don't know what kind of personality type I have. And I'm sure that anybody that's been coached by me may get the calm sense and be like, oh yeah, Bingy's the most chilled back coach I've ever had. But then other players I've had in my past may think, no thanks. I don't want to talk to that guy anymore because I hated his coaching. And that's every coach, man. Any coach that's loved by every player they've ever coached, that's a saint. And that'd be amazing. I'd like to meet that one.
And when you mention the management side, I think just as much as you're trying to learn about your players are trying to learn about you. Oh. And when they realize when you're super authentic and when, like you mentioned, if you just have that one bark, I think then the player almost learns, okay, I need to pay attention and this is something that's important rather than, oh, this is just him every single day. So and it sort of just becomes in one year out the other and you don't even think about it. So I think there's almost that balance and respect in the relationship when you have that good balance within yourself.
That balance is important because otherwise it comes in as static. And it's something that Freddie taught me actually when he was the head coach and I was the assistant is like, hey, when we are at the same time communicating something, I'm not clear. You're not clear. We're coming in sounding like static. Communication's not coming across. Now, the other thing is sometimes we can be talking to different people and that's a whole different world. Like if you're over there and talking to a kid and I'm over here talking to a kid, then no worries. That's not this, you're not creating static. And the other thing is you can create your own static. Like if I stand up and I'm shouting for 10 minutes, I mean, most of what I'm saying is not actually going to get even listened to or come across as like, what is he actually saying? So that kind of, it's a messaging that the best part about coaching is like, it's non-linear. I learned that in Moorhead, got really good at coaching that thing and thought I went to Monarchs and started barking again. You get what I mean? Like the learning was definitely not linear. And some players there would probably even say like, well, I don't know. It was just too much. But then others that I coached there, they demanded that of me. And would speak to me about it and like, hey, we got to raise the level and those kind of things. And it's a professional setting. Some are ready for that and some are not. But either way, whatever that case is, I can't concern myself with that. I got to concern with what I learned from out of that. And what I learned was I was foolish to go back in and try to coach again like I coached men's soccer. What was I thinking? At the base, it's boys, girls. But no, it doesn't make sense to any kind of coaching. Not that I know now. I just know that what I've learned through all those experiences is that everybody is sensitive. Everybody is sensitive. So you can present something, even if it's positive, how you word that sentence, what your tone is, absolutely. But where you place the learning moment in your sentence matters. And how you sandwich it. You've heard about sandwiching and that, right? Like, yeah. All of that matters, but then also if you try to do all that tricky stuff and you get to one of those genuine, like alpha dogs, I coached a girl like that at Moorhead, Brittany Kirchhoff. She was like, if I sugarcoated anything to her, she looked at me like, buddy, let's go, give it to me real. I'm like, okay. So like, you got to get to know the person and what kind of they need to know. And I think that's leaving that and going into directing and going into working with more youth again and kind of working with other leaders here in our academy, within our academy here at Sounders and at Seattle United and at Federal Way with the leaders that were my mentors. These people, James Cecil at Federal Way, Jimmy McAllister, Alex Tursky, Kyle Rodever at Seattle United. These people are Rich Reese. These guys are, when they reach across the aisle and say, all right, this is kind of how you said this. Maybe this. I'm a listener. I'm not going to be like, oh, God, thank God for saying this and be so, everybody's going to struggle with that moment. But if you can be a listener, Henry Bronner here, Craig Dalrymple, we have Wade Weber here. These people are leaders, absolute leaders, and have done it at different areas of their professional careers. So my ears are open for sure.
And then you mentioned the development side. You mentioned, you said it earlier with your club team growing up where many of the other teammates of yours went on to become professionals in many other regards in their own career, not necessarily in soccer. And I love that point of view because I think a lot of coaches or technical directors or leaders in organizations get stuck up with, like you mentioned, oh, we hope our player goes on to an MLS academy, or we hope he gets a professional contract or goes D1. But I think there's also the beautiful side of, look, we just created a really strong human being that's now turning into an adult and can go on and do their own things and build a life around themselves. Soccer is just the tool, and coaching is the tool, but it doesn't have to translate to soccer specifically. That can be anything in the world. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah. And honestly, like, the thing I'm most proud of is that thing. Like, there are people that I've coached that are doctors in the medical profession. Like, I mean, that's crazy. I started coaching when I was 16 though. So that helps that I was coaching a little girls team when I was 16, little 5-year-olds. But then also, I mean, ultimately, they turn into these other things. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? You know, and I met them, maybe some of them as seniors in high school or, middle of the college where they're in their mix. And then all of a sudden they're leading the floor in some kind of like nursing unit. Wow. Wow.
And then the last one you mentioned was the slim difference between winning and losing. And I love there's a stat on Federer, and I think he only won 51% of his matches.
Wow.
And the idea was in tennis, there's in any sport, the margins are so thin that just by him winning that amount of matches, it resulted in one of the greatest tennis players, if not the greatest tennis player of all time, right?
Of all time. Yeah, my favorite.
So
of all time.
I have to pull up the stat.
That's crazy.
Yeah, well, I have to pull up the stat, but all of the greatest tennis players, and I know that's just tennis because I think I saw it on Twitter or X, but yeah, it was around the 51% mark, where and that just shows the little margins in anything really worldwide, but it's specifically in sports and even in soccer, it's just so thin between winning and losing.
Yeah, I think the way I describe it to kids is, after a loss, it's easier for them to hear it, but after a wins too, you talk to them about it, like, I have won all the games you should lose, like basically it's a loss, but we win it, and the opposite, I've lost the ones you should win. And then you basically go across that, through that 51% maybe, that is astounding, by the way. Like, I did not know that. That's a crazy stat, but by the way, through that 51%, that if you stay steady through those and maybe even continue to develop and get better, that is what a professional footballer is. That's the only way I can describe it. But that's a professional in every sense. Like, if you work construction, if you roof houses, if you can have that consistency measure, people will still call you into ask for your services. And if you lack that consistency, if you lack that turnaround, a coach like Brian Schmetzer here, I tell people all the time, he doesn't play kids. He plays teenagers all the time. He plays teenagers a lot, but he doesn't play kids. So the way you can show that you're not a kid is to show some measure of consistency. And that's professionalism. That's professional football, at least that I have scouted for.
I want to get into your role now specifically. So let's dive into, what is your role? What does that actually look like? What are the day-to-day sort of operations of that? And then we'll get into sort of more of it and what the scouting side looks like for you.
Yeah. I wake up and I look at my phone and I check the texts, the emails, and the phone calls to see, and I hope this doesn't sound callous, to prioritize those callbacks. And if it's Henry Bronner or Wade Weber, bang, straight back. Obviously, those are the ones, I wake up with my family, so I don't need to check if they're calling, right? That's the one, unless I'm on the road. But then, those are the calls that say, hey, something needs to get handled now. Lauren Babcock and Ashley Yang are admins. If they have something, hit that right away, because they're going to need to run off with their days as well. But then, anything team related kind of gets hit first, and that's kind of within my role within of like, hey, do I need to solve anything of players that I've just brought in, or is there a trialist in, or something that's happening in Seattle, essentially. And then I go down that line and say, am I calling back a director from another state? Am I calling back a director from in-state? Am I good? And again, there's no hierarchy. It's like, out of state's more important. Definitely not. In fact, absolutely not. The local is the director to call back. Absolutely. And that's something I kind of know is, out of respect for them as people, but also Seattle is built out of the local players, our academy system. So like making sure to hit those back. And then you look down that line of all the potential players and everybody that wants to get into our academy. And I show people sometimes, I'll take my phone and I'll show them my list of, look at all these dots. Look at all these dots that I got to get back. And I'm talking to you right now. So I need you to understand the importance of this conversation because I don't have the minutes. And as soon as I have any kind of like, okay, then I step out and I have spent time with my family and I ignore my phone for a moment. And it's maybe part of my process that will not vibe with corporate America and how corporate America kind of spins, but it also keeps me mentally ready to
sane.
participate.
I was going to say mentally sane.
Yeah, like it's part of it. You know, there's people I talk to, scouts and things that are like, man, I had to take a year off or I had to take 2 years off. And they didn't even do it to relax. They do it to literally breathe, to take a moment to regroup and say they're going to be another person again. Like, I want to go do this. Because there's times, man, I wake up on a red eye and it's, or, you know, oh, wait, what city am I in? That's how it gets. And then I'm like, and then I look to the right and there's no family there, right? And anytime I can, I try to drag them with me to these things. And if it's a city or whatever it is, if I can, if we can afford it. But for the most part, you know, my wife is doing so much for our family at this time that like, yeah, that's the part that these kids and when I hit all these people back, this is the split of time that we're going to get. And then ultimately I have things I got to get to, training sessions. Sometimes the players will look over and I'm on the phone during a training session and it'll match up. Sometimes it's a Zoom I have to get on or something like this, you know, where I'm talking a little bit longer and a little more face to face. But every day is so different. I was watching the Cronin interview and he talks about how he kind of splits it, age group to age group.
Yeah.
I can't, but I can see why he struggles with it because I do struggle with it, like an age transfer of ages and stages and what players should be managing at certain ages and giving certain training environments, right? But for me, it's more like make a to-do list for the day. I have a to-do list for the week and I have a to-do list and a calendar for the month and basically the season. And I call the season, I'm not even getting into January. Like I have a calendar for January kind of set like a skeleton, but there's still events that come up now. Hey, you got to come see this guy. Hey, you got to come see this guy. And then I can put those in and get all that scouted. And then by the very end, we go see MLS Next Fest and final scouting thing. And then hang up the phone for a second and kind of do nothing. But from my side, not completely hang up because I got to talk to all these people and that's recruiting season.
Because next year starts, yeah.
Yeah. So now you can see how you've talked to other scouts and the job kind of gets crazy. But yeah, I'd say my to-do lists. And I say my wife helps me so much with my to-do lists and making sure that I hit those marks and saying, hey, did you call this person back? And because ultimately that's, if I miss a message or even now, like when we started recording and then had to start, re-record for the moment, I took that 20 minutes and called the players farther back on the ride over here because otherwise, when am I going to call him back today? I have to do other things, right? And this is a top player. This is my number one recruit. And I'm like, okay, I got to fit it in. So
what's that balance like? You obviously mentioned the balance. Your family's so important for you. So where's the line of trying to advance your career and make sure that the club's as successful as possible, as well as you? I know you only have your own personal goals. So what's the balance between having those personal goals of your own growth, but also spending time with your family, being around them and sort of getting away from your job?
Yeah. Man, I think I'm, at least to my end, from my perspective, I think I'm lucky enough to have, this kind of opportunity to taste something and kind of develop my career and continue to push. But then ultimately, if I'm going to live in a city, my wife is going to decide to live in a city. I'm not part of that decision. I'm going to present opportunities and say, this is what's going to happen or this is whatever it is. But when I moved to Seattle, she had never been to the Pacific Northwest. And I said, well, Henry Bronner's over there and he tells me I got to get to Seattle. That was it. That was what I did. I was like, he said, come to Seattle. So I'm going to Seattle. And what do you think? And she's like, well, let's go. Now my kids are 7 and 5. You can't just put them in the car seat and feed them here and there. It's more like we're moving a family and we're moving lives. Yeah. And they have friends. They love the neighbors. Right. So considering how much they love the neighbors, if I ever left the environment I'm leaving right now, it's definitely not my call, brother. It's Anna's. And
so that bond is really important then between you and your wife.
Oh yeah. And I also trust her judgment. Like, I'm out there with my ideas, and anybody that's ever managed me or been my supervisor kind of goes like, oh, yeah, this guy's out there with his ideas. But getting reined back in to making those ideas kind of go, anybody that's ever supervised me or managed kind of my life and helped me manage myself has helped me with that. And that's, I mean, Wade's probably going to laugh if he sees this interview. But my wife is been my best manager ever. Like, she has collected me when I was at my worst and has created this life for me that I'm like, I couldn't have dreamed of. I got a family. The kids are great. They're so smart. They love footy, which is like, all right, they love footy, but I'm also
a bonus. Yeah.
I'm a bit hesitant too. You know, my kid loves Man City. He wakes up in the morning. I'm a United fan. I'm like, okay, I mean, you can wear that color. It's cool. You know, so I'm wearing the color right now, you know, but it's part of what I'm doing. But then also something I'll say about that is managing it. There's times where we just go out and just kick it. They like to play. They want to get better. They're showing me all their skills. And I'm like, I'm so deep in the intricacies of defining a player and things like that, that like I have to wash my head over and over again. Like, don't look at it like that, and don't let them enjoy it. And because this is where, honestly, my goal, I tell my wife, I tell people all the time, like, if my kids want to watch a game with me when they're 35 years old and 33, like if they're in their 30s and want to sit down and watch a game with me still, then I haven't ruined it for them somehow. That's it. That's the goal. Because otherwise, they can play whatever they want. Kids in tennis right now, Mabel's in gymnastics. They can do whatever they want. I have no issue with what they do, you know, as long as they're trying for something and kind of working hard and working hard and enjoying themselves, right? But then footy, this is crazy. Like, once you actually get all the way in it, it's crazy, man. So like, I want to make sure that they're actually ready for that. Now, everybody's actually ready for that. But so I'm just kind of, I lean on my wife for like, what do you do here? And you kind of manage this, but I'm there filling up water bottles and carrying bags and things like that. So that's my favorite part of actually doing this, to be honest.
No, it's beautiful, almost, I guess you could say. It really is. The balance is so important. And I think I come from Canada, obviously, so a lot of the hockey dads are known for just pushing their kids past the limit constantly. They want to get them into the NHL, they want to get them into the OHL, they want to get them to college, whatever that is. And it ruins it for a lot of kids. A lot of kids end up that it almost skips a generation where that kid just falls out of love with the sport. And I think that balance is so important, right? You want to push your kids to continue to be successful and grow in whatever that is, but you also have to find the balance where you can lay back a bit and let them make their own decisions.
Yeah, and I've been erring on the side of like, if it gets to a point like, should I try it or not? I just don't. Because I'm like, well, if I go the other way, then I've failed something, right? But then my wife tells me, like, if they want to try it and you can help them, you better. I'm like, well, okay. From your whatever. I'm just going with the flow, you know, and yeah. So Caius and Mabel, they can be whatever they want. And I hope, you know, just be here for it and watch it.
No, that's great. I want to get back into the recruitment side of things. So let's go through, if you can, and if you're willing to, sort of go through the recruitment process. So from the first time that you hear someone's name or that you see someone on the field, all the way to bringing them into the academy and hopefully they go on to the college side or moving up the sort of Seattle system into the first team. I would love to hear sort of what that actually takes. What does that look like behind the scenes?
What, like a pathway is? Yeah. So I scout all kinds of events. There's no only this league or only that. I think there are players everywhere. There are concentrations of players, and they tend to, obviously go towards MLS next. But there's players in the ECNL, there's players in the EA, there's players in, ID2 and selections, ODP. So any of those events where Alianza's done a great job, where you go down and just see players, and as long as I kind of like vet it based on who's running it, not necessarily like, oh, do they know what they're talking about? More like, if I can find an intention, like, what's the intention behind this identification? Why are these, when someone presents a player to me, I always try to check the intention, because you never know. Football's crazy, right? I mean, there's reasons, there's some bad reasons people would be presenting a player. So yeah, I think, looking at all the different environments, you come back and say, okay, this player may be okay or great in the lower league. Say they're great in the lower league. If I drop them in, are they going to be okay in MLS Lex environment, or are they going to actually transfer? Like, are those skill sets going to transfer? Are they going to be able to complete the same actions at the same efficiency rates, things like that? But once I find the player, then the number one way to do it is to bring them into this environment. But I tend to not contact a player. If I've heard about a player, and I mean, I have my private network of people that can, clue me onto players and things like that. If I hear about a player or start to work with a player, I don't actually contact their families if I can avoid it, for about 12 months. Because most of these players I see at like 11 for the first time. 12, some. And one of my strongest mentors, Tony Lepore, you can't profile that young. Like, that's too young to profile. It's mad. But also, I'm scouting and recruiting for Seattle Sounders. It's not the national team. It's more like, if I'm not looking for them, another club will. There's, 30 after it? So, like, there's good scouts out there, man, and good scouting networks. And so I got to make sure, and if it's somebody that I can feel the family's right, the kid is that much of a difference maker, are they a shouting talent to anybody that kind of follows U.S. soccer's model of identifying players? Are they a shouting talent? And maybe they are that shouting talent. Then you look back at their development physically and say, hey, is this a person that can carry that physically? Are they overgrown, but in a way where it's they're not going to be big enough to play in MLS? Or are they overgrown in a sense of like, oh yeah, they're 5'6". I'm like, look at some of the players top players in the league. They're not cracking 5'9", some of these players, right? So I know players of all sizes, shapes, and sizes play in this league and all over the world. So ultimately, I just need to know that they hit that mark. And then you're looking for explosion, things like that. So if you can identify those kind of things outside and say, okay, I feel strongly. Now I call it ethically. I call the parent and I get through that debate of saying, okay, now your son is something. Your son is a player. This is what I want to do. This is how we want to provide, visit, trial, experience, Sounders Academy experience, home environment, everything. All those kind of things that maybe all of our resources must kind of extend to. Are you that player to do it? Now I can talk to the family about, look, we're not even offering that yet. Get in our environment, see how you do. Oftentimes we throw them in a game with our players of some kind. If it's a scrimmage, if it's a different higher level player, we can guest them through the MLS Next. But like that thing, how do they do? How do they not just play, interact with the players, interact with the staff in the hotel? How do they conduct themselves, right? So then all those kind of things happen. And we just did one with this weekend in Portland with our U15 group. And by Sunday, everybody's like, great person, great kid, great family, great. So all the things that I know are triple confirmed about the person and the family, right? Because the family is everything to what we do here. They can't just pluck a kid out and be like, oh yeah, it's going to be good. That's their support system. That's how they kind of survive. And then ultimately those are the people that will generally be there when all those good things and bad things come at them. They will still be those people. So you got to get to know everybody, little sisters, big sisters, all of it, right? And all of that goes well. We come back, we work back out. What can we do for this family? How can we get them in? And when are we going to get them in? For example, this player, we want to get them into our U16 team right away. How are we going to do that? Family is maybe not ready. Family is 100% ready. That's what we gauge on the next call. That's all up to the family, because I got kids, man. If someone told me, hey, you're going to take my kid and put it in someone else's house, what age is it appropriate? I don't know. Ask my wife. I told you that. Ask Dana, because that's not going to be me. I know it's important to me to have my kids in my house. And I know most families would have a similar sentiment. The ones that already in a place where, hey, my kid is actually ready. My kid can stand this. Those ones are going to be fine. Which there's no right or wrong. What I'm saying is it's all up to how the family understands their own son or daughter, maybe if they're going to a girls' academy somewhere, right? That like, can this person make it? And I don't know. I'm guessing at it. Parents like, maybe not. And that can help me. That can help me, and that can help the whole club estimate and how we bring them in. But yeah, that's the part where we ultimately want to bring them in the academy. And then once they're in our academy, we kind of break down what team are they eligible for. So age-wise, I mean, like, can they play in this U16 team age-wise? If they can't, say they're an 08, or say they're an 08 that's not, physically late developer, they have to play in the U7, 18 group. But for us, that's okay, because those players should be kind of pushing towards that edge of kind of being that thing, and then actually give us a better sense of, can this person survive in a Tacoma Defiance preseason in January? And like, what kind of person are they through this? Are they going to grind? Are they the kind of person that still develops? But yeah, our academy system is limited in teams by design. It helps us make decisions on professional footballers faster. And that's not necessarily, make the decision, sign them. That means sometimes cut them loose to the college pathway, which for us, we totally understand. You look at our first team as a division. The division would be, the top players, the designated players, and those kind of guys that are doing the go-getting thing. There's the college graduates, and there's the academy players. And it's a mix. Our roster is mixed like that. And I look at guys and I'm like a Danny Leyva or these Obed Vargas, Josh Atencio. These guys do what they do, and they're like, graduating from this and that. And I'm blown away because I'm like, Danny graduated college when I was changing my major. Like, what? There's something else, man. These kids are something else, is what I mean. And I'm blown away by that thing, is their ability to do that. But if they don't do that, that's what I mean. Like, go to university, get your education, be somebody, and then hunt the pro game after that, because you're at the most, you're going to be 23, and that's young still. But we do know at Sounders that there are windows that you can go into a young professional setting, in like the major developmental windows for signing pros. So watching players go off to college, sometimes we know like that may be something we may never see again. But it may be somebody that swings back, like Jordan or Jackson, Paulie Rothrock, those guys that swing back and they're like mature, right? They're old dads.
Yeah.
They're old dads, mature. So
you mentioned a lot there, the personality traits of a player and the family setting that he's surrounded by. One of my next questions that I had was sort of that key trait that you look for. Obviously, there's the physical traits of a player. There's the tactical traits of how are they approaching the game. But I'm curious, your number one trait. What are you looking for right from the start of a player? Because we discuss this a lot with coaches and different recruiters across the board. And you eventually get to the point where, look, a lot of these players are at an elite level. They play fairly similar. So what are those key traits that you look for then past that sort of physical or tactical trait?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two things that I would say are Sounders Academy things. I found players that actually matriculate to the first team and even to the second team. And the second team is a difficult place to crack too. Like, you can, even getting into a MLS Next Pro team is fascinating. But there's two things I kind of go with. And one of them is, it's easy. I kind of talked to my brother Kiki about this. It's competitive grit. Like, basically, but it's consistency. So like, basically, if you come in and you're competitive on a Tuesday and a Thursday, but it's kind of spotty, or are you always that gritty? Are you always that competitive? And those kind of people, they want to compete in all kinds of things. And sometimes off the field, they're less so. But once you get into a rondo at the beginning, once you get into, they're racing with the pennies, they're dying to win those little things in trainings. And you're like, what the heck? Like, why would you care that much about the penny race? But they do care about the penny race, because it's everything to them. And that's what kind of competitive dogs we're looking for here, right? And then the other side, major component, and this is every position, this is every positional profile, this is goalkeepers up to the 9, is they have to be learners. So I mean that by, like, sometimes you can gauge that by watching how they interact with a coach, or how they interact with maybe a leadership on the team, or communication to the team. Or the one that actually is one of the most difficult to track is, say you got like a left back that gets smoked by the winger. You're watching this left back and you're actually looking for a good 1v1 defender. You're looking for that. Like, that's what you need. Yeah, this is what we need. And you get that player gets smoked, and they're like fully toasted by this player. And you're thinking, okay, the next time, let's see what they do. And then maybe they step in a different way, a different angle shade, and force it a different direction. Maybe they still get something off, but there's just a little bit more of a delay on this player. Then second, maybe they start reaching out and they're talking to the center back about this next moment. Like, hey, this is going to happen. If they start to do things like that, they are learning within the moment, which is the most difficult thing to do in the game, especially when your heart rate's up and your buzz. I mean, anybody that's ever been above their head in a moment in a footballing match, You look at the clock and it says like 11th minute and you're like, oh boy, I got a long way to go. This feeling, it's something I scout. It's something I watch for. And I say, does this person learn from those moments? Then you can get them into your environment and say, yeah, well, they learn from experience. They learn from coaching. And like, that's one of the notes that I came back from the coaches and the staff from this weekend for the kid I'm recruiting is he looks right at you. He looks through you when you're talking to him about it. And then the next moment he implements. That is gold, because that means a player can shift formations on the fly. He can shift positions on the fly. He's getting information, but also he can process new things fast, which kind of goes against maybe curriculum learning or stagnant learning. But I believe in randomized learning, which is a little bit of take some new things every day and you're going to get better critical thinkers.
Are there, so you mentioned consistently competitive and learners. That's sort of the two key points that you summarize there. Is there first team examples of that? Like when you think of consistently competitive, what is like the first name that comes to mind? And same with learner. What's the first name that comes to mind when you think of a learner? Either someone that's come through the academy or just someone that you can look towards.
Okay. A lot are. So I'm going to say two names here, right? But I'm saying like a lot are. They're pretty much all of this is what I've noted on the first team, at the first team level. That's that's the standard basically. Reed Baker Whiting. He's the sweetest kid. I've known him since he was like young, right? Young teenager. And I used to scout him for Y&T and then kind of coming through. He's one of those kids that always comes over, says hello and shakes hands. And he's like great. Anybody that meets Reed will tell you the same. Great kid. Intense though. Like really intense. And if he's off the field, like if he's not training, it's always a hello, an embrace. Hey, how you doing? You ask how, everything. So he's just a great kid that way, which they all are kind of. But then on the field, if he's training or if he's doing, say he's coming back from an injury, doing a private thing or whatever he's doing, say he's just running around the field. If he has the kit on and he's training, he won't even glance at me. Like not even which 99% give me the what's up, at least. Like Pedro de la Vega will run off and like dap, like hug, and he's like a super like excited guy, Everybody's different. But Rito, that is a laser. That is an absolute laser of a human being, for sure. Yeah, that would be that. Him and Jackson kind of stand out as this like, oh my God. And then Paulie Rothrock, he's leading the 6-minute run by meters in our club, and there's only one way you lead the whole club in the 6-minute run by meters. It's by being an absolute relentless worker, like relentless. So those players kind of stand out. And then again, you could literally, every player is that way. Like they're just that way. Professionals, consummate professionals. And then yesterday I was watching, had a couple other recruits in town this week and their families, and we stopped and they're little attacking players. And we stopped because, Tom Dutra, the goalkeeper coach, is running a session with the goalkeepers, Castro, Thomas, and Fry, right? And it's quiet. Like, it's not one of those places where you can come in and chat it up, and they're in the zone. Like, they're zoned in, they're working. Tom turns around, sees them in little Sounders kits, and fist bumps them, and I'm like, thank you, Tom. Like, you don't have to break what you're doing to say what's up. Like, you don't. But it's Tom. That's how he kind of operates. So if he didn't want to, he wouldn't have done it. There may be moments where he doesn't do it. That's just kind of, he's a worker and he's doing the business. Says hi to them. But I just told these kids, I said, you're not goalkeepers, but just watch this. We watched for about, 15 minutes. Look at the concentration level. Look how intense they all are. I don't think I saw an error. Like they're all hitting balls exactly where they needed to hit them. And Coach Tom I tell him, he gives like a positive narration of what he's watching. And it has technical like changes, like, you got to fix this or hit this next one or get this next one this way. But like, there's no negative tone. And I call it a narration because he doesn't go quiet. Like he basically carries on talking about every action that he's watching as it's going. And so that all the goalkeepers are taking it in, right? Mm-hmm. And these guys, and I believe this, Thomas and Castro are watching this, and they have professionals in their own right. But Steph Fry here is a club legend, right? And he could take moments off. He could take a day off, I'm sure. And they'd be like, well, I've seen clubs bend for that thing. Steph Fry is learning. So like he's looking over, nodding at coach. It kind of reminds me a bit of like how a youth coach regards their coach, which for me is not a knock on Stefan. In fact, it shows me that he's one of the best learners I think I've ever watched professionally. Like he's just absorbing more information now at this like a point in his career where he's the man. Like he is this guy. He is this. He could walk. He could take days off if he wanted to, and people would be like, "Dang, he's going to do that," but he doesn't. He doesn't take moments off, and then he's taking information, buddy. That's a learner. That for me is like, I don't know. For these kids to watch that, they were blown away. And then they were blown away because he's heading the ball in. I'm like, this guy could be a 9. So one of the one-touch finishes inside of the foot, one of the little kids looked over at me like, and like, yeah, you haven't struck a ball that well in your life. So, yeah, it's cool to watch those kind of things. It's like I have the opportunity to watch these professionals. And a lot of times our kids are in there, so I'll go because our kids are in there to watch how they kind of float. But then sometimes if our kids aren't in there, I'll stop by and just watch that. It's just remind myself what I'm actually searching for. Because I'm searching for the guy that's going to play on that field. We're not here for academy championships. They're great. We are here for finding the next professional footballers. And as we do that, we develop professionals, like I told you, in every way. But ultimately, this academy functions to do that. And we're talking about, we've won before as an academy, right? So there's the history of our academy winning things. So it's not like it's not going to happen or whatever, but the intention for our club is to win MLS Cups. So that's my job, is to help us win MLS Cups my way and from what I do.
And I think having someone like Stefan Fry is so important in that situation, right? You mentioned having, whether it's trialists or academy kids, when we're speaking on professionals as just professional people rather than footballers, I think naturally when you can have someone like that in that situation, I think is so key. And I have a story on Paul Rothrock when he was still with Toronto.
Give it to him.
I was watching him and it must have been his last game for Toronto while he was with the second team there. And I could see, I can totally see now that you've given me sort of the insights from your point of view, I could totally see that in him then, where look, that wasn't an ideal situation for him. You can see how quickly he's transitioned to the first team level. Yeah. So I think he almost knew that at the time, but having someone almost be humble in that situation, you know what, this is the situation I'm in, and I'm just going to try and maximize my opportunity here. And you look at one quick off season, a trade to a different club in an organization, maybe something where he's a little bit more used to the environment around him, and now you've just seen him thrive, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. And I think from your end, that's what you want to see in a player, right? You want to see them go through those hardships, but also learn from them and grow to be a better, almost a more mature human being, but a more mature player at the same time, which I think is key.
That part's been a pleasure, honestly, to get to know him, because I did not actually personally work with him before he went off to do the things out there that he did, and he's from here. But guys like Kalani Kosarienzi, who was drafted from UW, I pick their brains all the time because they're almost the opposite of what I do. I'm trying to find the young, almost preteen player that's going to be a teenager, that's going to go do the thing, like the no college thing, right? If I can find that next unicorn, that's wizard. But these guys are the opposite of that. Like the way Kalani taught him, Kalani went to a college ID camp at UW. Like that's how he went to an ID camp, man. I talk to him all the time. I pick his brain, like, buddy, how did you get to where you are? And his word was hard. And then he meets up with these academy kids that are caught up in the same space, and they are now competing for roles and competing for jobs. But there's a resilience that kind of comes from what Paul did, what Kalani did, Jackson did. They go and they get told no. And I send messages out to people, even young kids here, like, hey, you're maybe out of our futures program, or when Wade here talks to players about how they're going to be exiting the academy, it's a no. But you look at across the world, the top professionals released from academies all the time. It's more like if you actually look, it's more regular. It's not the rarity. It's more, they got cut from that academy and then they went to this one. And then they went to that one. And then, like you said, found a coach, found something about it. But the thing about Paul is he's a question asker. So he's walking around to anybody that has a thing, he comes over and says, hey, what do you think I can do? And to anybody that has an eye on it. And that's the kind of thing, like if that's a learner, that's top learner kind of personality with the competitive edge, I'm just trying to find more little Paulie Rothrocks. and guys like him and guys like that are, maybe they already have that dog in them. They don't need to fail so much to get there. That was the ultimate goal, because then we can, put them into quicker, pathway to pro. But again, what, my mentor here, Henry Bronner, he's seen all those guys come through as little kids, and, has said this, and then, for say Paul Ross-Rocco specifically, Jimmy McAllister over there, Alex Tursky, these guys have, Kyle, they've talked about these guys like they're just these little boys, and that's what they are. They're just little boys to them. They'll always be these little boys, and it's like, it makes you so proud when they score. It makes you so proud when a guy like Jordan Morris, Christian Roldan, these guys that spend time with my recruit, they come in, they come over. They don't need to, but they come over. Danny Leva spends time with the kids that I'm trying to recruit the most, and like, for no other reason but that he's a good guy. Those guys are, like, if you come in and you don't see those as your role models and say, hey, this is what kind of other guys, I'm trying to find more people like that. And I think if you're looking at, you said, what I'm finding, it's competitive, it's the learner, but ultimately people say character. That's really ambiguous. What's character, and what character is that? What's a virtue, right? And what are those? Those are going to be different for everybody. But ultimately, I have really great role models within the club system to say, that's kind of like that, or that's kind of like that. And then, given the resources, given it's 2024, maybe they're going to be even better. Maybe we're going to have more. Maybe they're going to get more out of this kid. But I don't know. Maybe I don't bother the kid at all, never call their families, and they fail and fail and fail, and they get farther. I don't know. There's no short way to get to a professional football, that's for sure.
I think this conversation could go on forever, but we're gonna wrap things up now.
Okay, yeah.
I've got two final quick fire questions, and then I'll let you wrap it up. So the first one here is, what is one vital part of your daily routine in order to be as successful as possible in your life?
Time with my family. That's it. Like, as much, if sometimes it's a whole day, and that's great, but that's the most, it's not part of my routine. It's where I shove that into my routine of everything else, of all the different things I have to do. And that's probably, without that, without Anna, nothing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if you could sit down with one person, dead or alive, for a meal, who would it be and why? And we've changed it, so if you want to, what you can do is you can do like one footballing personality and then just someone else that you would.
I got it.
You got one?
The answer. Yeah, I got the answer. It's not a footballing personality. It's not a footballer at all. I mean, I don't think my grandmother ever either. Neither of them ever saw me play. My grandmother on my mom's side, I never met her. She died of alcoholism. And my grandmother on my father's side, she liked to stay home, man. She wasn't really trying to go out to the fields and things like that. So we come from farm people. So staying at her house, I went to see her, essentially. And she passed too early in my life. I was young, when she passed. So if I was to have, you said dead or alive? If I was to have dinner with anybody, it'd be those two. And hopefully I can invite my family so they can meet them. That's it.
That's amazing. Bingy, I really appreciate the conversation. I think not only did I learn a lot, but I'm sure the audience did as well. If you have any last words to wrap things up, and then we'll head out.
Last words are this, man. I got to give a shout out to our academy development system. Our staff here, we talk about what I need and the different things I need as a recruiter from our staff. And we kind of talk about what do we need, and we kind of stretch people, forget finances. We stretch people to meet the needs of our academy everywhere. And I'm sure every academy is like this. But all the work that we do here, it's not me. I present a player, and then I hope that the entire group can do it. So no, there's people here, our coaching staff, our admins, Lauren and Ashley, they're invaluable to what we do. Ryan, Brandon, it's Elfaz. These guys are helping our kids once I get them over. Because once I get them over, I can't spend every moment of the day. I can't even, I'm not coaching them. I'm not anything. It's just present. Come on, guys, let's do it. Hopefully we can kill it. And I think they do a fantastic job. Being as imperfect as people are, I think they just do a fantastic job.
Bingy, I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Okay. Speak soon. Absolutely.
Cheers.